Alone in the kitchen with an eggplant. For 8 years, I lived in a one-room apartment, a little larger than the Columbia Encyclopedia. It is lucky that I never met Wilt Chamberlain, because if I had invited him for coffee, he would have been unable to spread his arms in my room, which was roughly 7 by 20. All right, so interesting stuff here. Wilt Chamberlain, for people who do not know, was a very big man, basketball player in the 80s, humongous human being. So the apartment was the size of the Britannica Encyclopedia, which was a set of book, of course. And but it wasn't very big. I mean, all right. So that's very funny. Was roughly, ricordiamoci, approssimativamente si usa tanto. E qua è un bellissimo condizionale tipo 3. Se l'avessi invitato per un caffè, sarebbe stato would have been, participio passato del verbo, unable to spread his arms in my room. Okay, so we see the grammar makes sense. I had enough space for a twin-sized bed, a very small night table, and a desk. This desk, which I use to this day, was meant for a child of, say, 11. Say, alle volte, serve per dire tipo. Of, say, 11. Trovo molto carino che lei usa sempre la stessa scrivania. At the foot of my bed was a low table that would have been a coffee table in a normal apartment. In mine it served as a lampstand, and beneath it was a basket containing my sheets and towels. Next to a small fireplace, which had an excellent draw, tiraggio, was a wicker armchair, an ungainly wicker footstool, which served as a table of sorts. Wicker, non so dirlo in italiano, wicker, oh my gosh. Wicker is, how do you call this stuff in Italian? Anyways, she had a little table, an ungainly vuol dire preso male, ungainly, of a person, awkward, clumsy, un po' preso male, ecco. Ho visto che c'era una piccola cosa, adesso andiamo a vederla. So it looks like it was kind of funny. And of course, this is going to take an hour just to see a picture. Please. No. Where is it? Ungainly. Where's the picture? We lost it. All right, I was hoping. Oh. What are other words for ungainly? Oh, awkward, clumsy, gawky, unwieldy, ungraceful, maladroit, graceless, la più bella di tutte. Clunky, lumbering, che si muove a stento, hulking, che si muove pesantemente. Bravissimo, il nostro professor Uccellino. Okay, good. In mine it served as a lampstand, and beneath it was a basket containing my sheets and towels. Next to a small fireplace, which had an excellent draw, was a wicker armchair and an ungainly wicker footstool, which often served as a table of sorts. Instead of a kitchen, this minute apartment featured a metal counter. Underneath was a refrigerator the size of a child's playhouse. On top was what I called the stove, which was only 2 electric burners, in short, a hot plate, just like the one that I bought for the other kitchen. A hot plate. 2 electric burners. Many people found this place charming, at least for 5 minutes or so. Many thought I must be insane to live in so small a space, but I loved my apartment and found it the coziest place on earth. It was on a small street in Greenwich Village and looked out over a mews of shabby little houses, in the center courtyard of which was a catalpa tree. The ceiling, mews, vuol dire, adesso non me lo farà fare, ma mews sono, vediamo, this is what it is, like a set of neighborhood, okay? So when they have this extension, they like to call it a mews, all right? Good. It's a very old word. Shabby vuol dire non proprio prese benissimo, ma insomma. The ceiling was fairly high, a good thing since a low one would have made my apartment feel like the inside of a box of animal crackers. Love it. Animal crackers. Eccoli qua. This is the box. It was kind of small, but every joy in the world was contained within it. I love them. I love the hippopotamus more than anything else. There he is, my guy. My cupboard shelves were so narrow that I had to stand my dinner plates on end. Naturally, there being no kitchen, there was no kitchen sink. I did the dishes in a plastic pan in the bathtub and set the dish drainer over the toilet. Of course, there was no space for anything like a dining room, table, something quite unnecessary as there was no dining room. When I was alone, I ate at my desk or on a tray in bed. When company came, I opened a folding card table with a cigarette burn in its leatherette top. This object was stored, leatherette è un modo per dire il falso cuoio. This object was stored in a slot between my countertop and my extremely small closet. Primitive as my kitchen arrangements were, I had company for dinner fairly often. I moved in one cool summer day when I was 23. That night I made dinner for two college friends who were known as the Alices, since they were both named Alice and were best friends. I remember our meal in detail. A young man had given me a fondue pot. Where are you? There you are, fondue pot. The portable ones. Fondue pot. I wonder if you have one. And it's taking forever for the image too. 109 euros for this. All right. Great. A fondue pot. Young man as a moving in present. These implements, whose real function was to sit unused on a top shelf collecting furry coats of dust, were commonly given as wedding and housewarming presents in the 60s and are still available at the garage sales of the 80s. I wonder in 2025. They were made of stainless steel and sat on a three-legged base, at the bottom of which was a ring to hold a can of sterno. Sterno era il gas, eccolo qua, il propano. Si metteva là e pensate che aria salubre. Along with the pot came four long-handled forks, two of which I still have to this day. They are extremely useful for spearing string beans and for piercing things that have fallen onto the floor of your oven. The fellow who gave it to me was fond of a place called Le Chalet Suisse, where I once had enjoyed beef fondue. I felt it would be nice to replicate this dish for my friends. I served three sauces, two of which I made. One was tomato based, and the other was a kind of vinaigrette. The third was a béarnaise in a jar from a local delicatessen. Parlavamo di questo, affettati, quindi il delicatessen è un posto che vende formaggi affettati, roba europea, ecco. I bought sirloin from the butcher, e basta, and cubed it myself. When my two friends came, I lit the sterno and we waited for the oil to heat. While we waited, we ate up all the bread and butter. One of the Alices began to eat the béarnaise sauce with a spoon. The other Alice suggested we go out for dinner. Once in a while, we would dip a steak cube into the oil to see what happened. At first, we pulled out oil-covered steak. After a while, the steak turned faintly gray. Finally, allora qua, come faccio uscire? Finally, I turned one of my burners on high and put the pot on the burner to get it started. Thereafter, we watched with interest as our steak cubes sizzled madly and turned into little lumps of rubbery coal. Carbone. Finally, I sauteed the remaining steak in a frying pan. We dumped the sauces on top and gobbled, mangiare alla grande, everything up. Then we went to the local bar for hamburgers and french fries. Ah, America. It took me a while to get the hang of the two burners. To get a hang of something vuol dire abituarsi ad usare, diventare bravi, pratici. Meanwhile, my mother, you are getting the hang of English. Meanwhile, my mother gave me a toaster oven, thinking this would ensure me a proper breakfast. My breakfast, however, was bacon and egg on a buttered roll, pezzo di pane, uh, pagnotella roll, from an underground cafeteria at the Madison Avenue side of Lexington Avenue, stop of the E train. My toaster oven was put to far more interesting use. I began with toasted cheese, that staple that una usanza consolidata of starving people who live in garrets. Toasted cheese, what the hell is a garret? I have no idea. A garret. You see, the teacher learns as well. I don't care about the Italian right now. Garret is an English word to a small, unfurnished room at the top of the house, quindi sarebbe un po' just under the roof, quindi l'attico, che vivevano in piccoli spazi sotto gli attici, a garret. Quindi mangiavano formaggio arrostito. Toasted cheese is still one of my favorite foods, and I brought home all sorts of cheese to toast. Then, after 6 months of the same dinner, I turned to lamb chops, costicini d'agnello. A number of fat fires transpired, none serious enough to call the fire department. I then noticed after a while that my toaster oven was beginning to emit a funny burnt rubber smell when I plugged it in. This, I felt, was not a good sign, and so I put it out on the street. With the departure of my toaster oven, I was thrown back, so to speak, on my two burners. Quello che si fa in città, anche a Toronto, non ti serve un forno, lo metti fuori sulla strada, a tempo 10 minuti, sparisce. È il sistema di riciclaggio, riuso sostenibile più bello che c'è, perché hai rotto il microonde, lo metti fuori in strada, bye bye, somebody's gonna take it. It's incredible. Two burner cooking is somewhat limiting, although I was constantly reading or being read to about amazing stovetop feats, achievements. People who rigged up gizmos, ok, to rig up vuol dire modificare, creare, gizmo è un altro modo per dire apparecchiature, on the order of a potato baker and bake bread on it, a thing that suspended live coals over a pot so tops of things could be browned. But I was not brave enough to try these innovations. Instead, I learned how to make soup. I ate countless pots of lentil, white bean, and black bean soup. I tried neck bones and ham hocks and veal marrow bones, tutte ossa, and bacon rinds. I made thousands of omelettes and pans on my mother's special tomatoes and eggs. I made stewed chicken and vegetable stew. I made boils of pickled cabbage, green cabbage, dark sesame oil, salt, ginger, and lemon juice. If people came over in the afternoon, I made cucumber sandwiches with anchovy butter. Questa è una roba molto British. Cucumber sandwiches. Is very typical English food. They take a cucumber and they cut the bread. It's the classic. The Queen of England loved them. I love them too. They're good, refreshing. Burro alle sardine. I would invite a friend or friends for Saturday night. 3 people could fit comfortably in my house, but not four. Although one famous evening I actually had a tiny dance party in my flat, much to the inconvenience of my downstairs neighbor, a fierce old Belgian who spent the afternoon in the courtyard garden entertaining his lady friends. At night he generally pounded on his ceiling with a broom handle to get me to turn my music down. My upstairs neighbor, on the other hand, was Muncie, Indiana socialist with a limp. Muncie in città. I was often madly in love with him, and sometimes he with me, but in between he returned my affections by stomping around in his apartment on his gimpy leg. The result, gimpy, di legno, gimpy leg, gimpy. To describe the leg is injured or by a limp, ora forse era un po', insomma, io l'ho sempre preso per legno, ma insomma, uno che camminava male. All right, uno zoppo. The result of a motorcycle accident, io penso sempre ai pirati, and playing the saxophone out the window. New York City, New York. On Saturday mornings, we would walk to the Flavor Cup or Puerto Rico importing coffee store to get my coffee. Often it was a freshly roasted and the beans were still warm. Coffee was my nectar and my ambrosia. I was very careful about it. I decanted my beans into glass and kept them in the fridge, and I ground them, participio passato di grind, in little batches in my grinder. I wandered down Bleecker Street, where there was still a couple of push carts left, to buy vegetables and salad greens. I went to the butcher, then bought the newspaper and a couple of magazines. Che roba degli anni 80, the magazines. Finally, I went home, made a cup of coffee, and stretched out on my bed, which, when made and pillowed, doubled as a couch. I spent the rest of the morning in total indolence before cooking all afternoon. One Saturday, I decided to impress a youth whose mother, a French woman, had taught him how to cook. A recipe for pot roast with dill presented itself to me. Dill. There we are. Dill. Un altro modo per dire in italiano. Andiamo su Wikipedia perché mi manca la parola in italiano. And it is. Non si sa. Comunque è una spezia. Adesso forse qualcuno saprà dirmi. L'anice, eccolo là, forse quello. Um, Pot roast with dill presented itself to me, and I was not old or wise enough to realize that dill is not something you really want with your pot roast. An older and wiser cook would also have known that a rump steak needs to be baked in the oven for a long time and does not fare well on top of the stove. The result was a tough gray wedge with the texture of a dense sponge. To pay me back and show off, this person invited me to his gloomy apartment, where we ate jellied veal and a strange pallid ring that quivered and glowed with faintly purplish light. This, he told me, was a cold almond shape. The greatest meal cooked on those two burners came after a night of monumental sickness. I had gone to a party, past perfect, and disgraced myself. Oh no. Ha fatto una figuraccia. Chissà cosa ha combinato. The next morning I woke up feeling worse than I had ever felt in my life. After 2 large glasses of seltzer and lime juice, 2 aspirins, and a morning long nap, I began to feel better. I spent the afternoon dozing, fare pennicelle, reading Elizabeth David Italian food. By early evening I was out of my mind with hunger, but feeling too weak to do anything about it. Suddenly the doorbell rang, and there was my friend from work. She brought with her 4 veal scallops. Veal, ovviamente, carne di veal è la carne di mucca, veal. Non mi sta venendo la parola in italiano. Veal è il vitello, probabilmente sì. Right. A little bottle of French olive oil, a bunch of arugula, 2 pears, and Boursol cheese, and a loaf of bread from Zito's Bakery on Blacklow Street. Voi non ci crederete, ma io ci sono stato qua. I would have wept tears of gratitude, but I was too hungry. We got out the card table and set it, and washed the arugula in the bathtub. Then we sauteed the veal with a little lemon, mixed the salad dressing, and sat down to one of the most delicious meals I have ever had. Beautiful. Then, having regained my faculties, I felt I ought to invite the couple at whose house I had behaved so badly. They were English. The husband had been my boss. Now they were going back to England, and this was my chance to say goodbye. At that time I had 3 party dishes: chicken with sesame seeds and broccoli, chicken in an orange-flavored cream sauce, chicken with paprika and Brussels sprouts, but the wife, who was not my greatest fan, could not abide chicken and suggested through her husband that she would like pasta. Spaghetti alla carbonara was intimated, and I picked right up on it. Spaghetti is a snap to cook, but it is a lot snappier if you have a kitchen. I, of course, did not. It is very simple to drain the spaghetti into colander if your kitchen sink, dump it into a hot dish, and sauce it at once. Colander. Lots of words. There it is, lo scolapasta. Since I had no kitchen sink, I had to put the colander in my bathtub. My bathroom sink was too small to accommodate it. At this time, my bathroom was quite a drafty place. Draft, entrava l'aria, since a few weeks before a part of the ceiling over the bath had fallen into the tub. and now as I took my showers I could gaze at exposed beams. Therefore the spaghetti, by the time the sauce hit it, had become somewhat gluey. Ah, Americani. The combination of clammy pasta and cream sauce was not a success. The look on the wife's face said clearly, "You mean you dragged me all the way downtown to sit in an apartment the size of a placemat for this?" When I was alone, I lived on eggplant, the stove-top cook's strongest ally. I fried it, stewed it, and ate it crisp and sludgy, hot and cold. It was cheap and filling, and was delicious in all manner of strange combinations. If any was left over, I ate it cold the next day on bread. Dinner alone is one of life's pleasures. Certainly, dinner alone is one of life's pleasures. Alone is senso di da soli. Certainly, cooking for oneself reveals man at his weirdest. People lie when you ask them what they eat when they are alone. A salad, they tell you. But when you persist, they confess to peanut butter and bacon sandwiches, deep fried and eaten with hot sauce, or spaghetti with butter and grape jam. Oh my God, what is wrong with these people? I look forward to nights alone. I would stop to buy my eggplant and some red peppers. At home, I would fling off my coat, switch on the burner under my tea kettle, slice up the eggplant, and make myself a cup of coffee. I could do all this without moving a step. When the eggplant was getting crisp, I turned down the fire and added garlic, tamari sauce, lemon juice, and some shredded red peppers. While this stewed, I drank my coffee and watched the local news. Then I uncovered the eggplant, cooked it down, and ate it at my desk out of an old Messian dish. Mason dish. I have no idea what that is. So let's have a look. So I guess it's the type of china. There you go. I'm pretty interested in what the history of this stuff is. So I'll have a read later. All right. This is interesting, and I'll read about it. Then I uncovered with my feet up on the wicker footrest, and as I watched the national news, I ate eggplant constantly with garlic and honey, eggplant with spaghetti, eggplant with fried onions, and Chinese plum sauce. Since many of my friends did not want to share these strange dishes with me, I figured out a dish for company. Fried eggplant, rounds, quindi tagliati, made into a kind of sandwich, fantastic, of pot cheese, chopped scallions, fermented black beans, and Munster cheese. This with a salad and a loaf of bread made a meal. Dessert was always brought in from outside. Afterwards, I collected all the pots and pans and silverware and threw everything into my pan of soapy water in the bathtub. And that was my dinner party. Now I have a kitchen with a four-burner stove and a real fridge. I have a pantry and a kitchen sink and a dining room table. But when my husband is at a business meeting and my little daughter is asleep, I often find myself alone in the kitchen with an eggplant, a clove of garlic, and my old pot without the handle, about to make a weird dish of eggplant to eat out of the Messian soup plate at my desk. That's so touching. At the same desk, of course, for an 11-year-old. So that is the story for this week.